It doesn't have to be this like 180-degree life shift. It could be small, incremental. It doesn't have to be so dramatic. But people look at it as like any change is dramatic, and that becomes scary for them.
All right, Bobby, welcome to the show. How you been?
What's up, buddy? I'm doing well, man. Better now that I see you.
That's right. So listen, it's been what? 20, I don't want to date ourselves, 25, 26, 27 years since we first met, right? And been a long time in between because you've been busy, right? I've been busy between us reconnecting again until a few weeks back. And funny enough, it's been good to connect again. And I think part of that conversation we are talking about, is like you just get busy, right? You're out there doing things, you're making things happen, right? And so in that part, it's not that we don't want to connect back with people, but we're just busy, and then life gets in there. You have family, you have commitments for that point, but you have been doing a lot, right? You're founder and CEO of Green Ridge Wealth Planning, NJ Biz leader in finance in 2024, owner of 18 store Dunkin' franchises, which I think when we first met, your family was involved in that business for quite some time, right? So that's been something. The rest of this we're speaking to family office, manufacturing business, de facto business coach, right? And then of course the Business Unchained podcast host, right? So what led you down the path of just saying, you know what, it's time to get out there and talk about business on the podcast? What's been the big driver?
Well, first I want to thank you for having me on. I think this is a really good, good kind of continuity to the connection we've already started a couple of weeks ago. But that's the funny thing about social media, right? See you on Instagram, you're doing these posts, you yourself are, blowing up on the speaking scene, and you're doing some great things with your business, and it's fun to watch, but it also doesn't feel like you're that far away. So even
Mhm.
though it's been so many years, I still feel like I'm somewhat connected, and it's that's the power of social media these days.
1000%.
So I love talking to business owners. For me, I just have a lot of fun with it, picking their brain to see where they've been. This podcast was just my way of having some fun. I kind of got to today a little bit, in a funky path, which is funny because, people usually say that life throws you these curveballs and puts you exactly in the space that you're meant to be in. And life kind of did that with me. So it was a funny turn of events. And now I just, I love talking to business owners and paying back, paying forward some of the life lessons that I've learned along the way, and just having fun with it, man.
When you talk about business and you talk about all the things you're doing, right? You start with one and you start with two, and then it builds on it. It makes sense, the trajectory as you talk about from where you were to where you are today, right? What's been some of the takeaways as you've gone from each business? And I don't directly know. I know, of course, the Dunkin' franchises, but I don't know where the manufacturing business or the family office or Green Ridge Wealth Planning, I don't know which order of trajectory those came across, but what's been each stepping stone, a learning lesson that's gone from them in between?
So you know what? I always like to just take a step back and give you a little rehash of my story. So this way everything kind of makes sense. Cause I think, the work that I've been doing over the past couple of years really lays my story really lays the framework for what it is that I'm doing. So after we left Lehigh, double major, finance, marketing, investment banking, like that was the goal. Taking some graduate classes at Stern. So I'm in the city. Everybody we graduated from that was in finance or marketing was pretty much in the city, and having a lot of fun, right? Taking my CFA exam. That was pretty grueling. But after 9/11, my mother and my father, within 18 months of one another, they both went in for open heart surgery. So my mother, she has congenital heart disease. My father, Italian, just has the typical, Italian genetic issues, especially with the diet that he had, and found ourselves in a really precarious situation. But, after 9/11, it wasn't like this, right? There was no Zoom. There was no opportunity for us to really connect. It was jumping on the phone, doing things remotely. You were really isolated. And we tried to figure out how to get things back to work. And during that time, my father just kept poking me and he says, listen, why don't you get into the family business? Why don't you get to the family business? And at the time, he was franchising Dunkin' Donuts, had it for about 20 years. My aunts and my uncles were involved. And because of that, I was like, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I will never do that.
Now, did he start that business, or like who was the driver that said that that this franchisee model is the route to go?
So his cousin uh, originally pulled him in 20 years earlier. And my father and he, when I was graduating high school, broke up. My dad went on his own. My dad always looked at he always looked at his role as more of a provider, not so much as a father. So basically, growing up with an entrepreneur as a dad who was nose to the concrete, just grinding, grinding, grinding. After he left his uncle his cousin, was when he went from about 4 or 5 locations to those 20 locations. So he was already on hyperdrive when I jumped into the fray, and he was not, he was getting through his quintuple bypass. That just gave him more fuel to continue that path and just, blow the doors off of it. So I spent like 9 years with him. And along the way, it was always dad's business. I never looked at it as this was going to be my business. It was always his business. So after I had my second son, was when I really took a look back in terms of that comment that I made to you earlier on about him saying, I'm more of a saw myself as more of a provider than a father. And I didn't want to be that for my kids. I wanted to be a provider and a father, but I wanted to be a father first. So I left the family business, which was, probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I really had a desire to get back into finance. It wasn't going to be the same traditional path that I was on. I wanted to get into an advisory role because, being a business owner, you're solicited 100 times a day by people who just want to sell you stuff. And you have to either just turn it off, disregard, maybe miss some really good opportunities, or funnel through them as much as you possibly can. And for me, especially around the financial side of it, I wanted to be that person, that advisor to business owners to help guide them through what it is that they needed to do within their business. Because at that point, we were doing, $55 million business. We had 750 employees. I knew a thing about something. So I got into this business, and what I realized was exactly what I did not want to be was exactly what they were pushing. It was all about sales, assets to the door. What are you bringing in? What are you bringing in? What are you bringing in? And for me, my mentality was, listen, that'll all come in time, but I'm going to continue to cut my teeth, get my designations, and get my licensing. So I really know what the hell I'm talking about with this stuff. So I didn't like that environment. I wanted to do my own thing. I opened up Green Ridge, and we're a fee-only fiduciary investment management firm, which was great for the first couple of years. I mean, grew it to like 400 million in assets. Let me take one step back. Back to dad was he and I didn't talk for the first year, and we
Angry about you leaving, just the conflict of you stepping out of the business.
Italians from New
Yeah, I know.
Jersey, pride with familia. My son left the business. No bueno. So yeah, no, and you know what? I was a little upset with just our dynamic, how we were, father son, constantly at odds, friction on how to do things, and it just wasn't healthy for me either.
You know what was tough is funny enough, I went back and so I left school, right? Of course, with the finance degree, but moved to New York City and started working in bars and restaurants. Completely different linear path than you did. But at one point, after Hurricane Sandy, went out and helped my dad's construction business, right? And we really took it on. And the hardest thing for me was that, you saw the struggle that would go through, especially like a family business, right? You would see this for years. And my whole point, the same conversation was like, I'm never going to do this until I am, right? Then I'm helping out. My little brother's out there. He's working, like, my aunt, like everybody is there, but you would see things happen in real time and you would know there's an easier way, but then you would have the conflict and the friction of being like, hey dad, here is the easier path forward to get at least equal or most times better result. But it would be like, this is the way we've always done it, right? And so you would
That's the
have this
problem.
part where you have to sit here, right? It's always there of just being like, listen, like, I see it. Like, let's just open the door. You can get to the other side. No, let's go through the wall. Well, why should we go through the wall? Well, we've been going through the wall for our entire life. Well, okay, let's not go through the wall. Let's open a door, and then there would be that conflict, right? And that's what it for me was the biggest struggle, right? With just working in the family business was just you all have it, right? You and your dad both want the same thing, right? You want a better life for all around, right? But then that same part is that because you're so close, the tension takes over, right? And it creates that conflict that easily can be surpassed, but it's hard to get around.
Well, the conflict is also, you're my kid. I paid for your college. Shut up At one point, you'll reap the rewards, but until that happens, I'm the boss,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
cool. I mean, listen, that is in fact factual information. It's funny because hindsight's always 2020, right? The one designation that I went after was certified family business specialist, and I'm also certified in business succession planning. It's kind of like sometimes the crazy people go back and become therapists.
I like it.
But for what I've learned a lot with working with family businesses and just even reflecting back onto my own family businesses, there was no communication or transparency. It was just 24 hours revolving into the next 24 hours with no clear definition of really what was the future to look like other than I was going to be there in some leadership capacity. And a lot of times, we have these conversations and what I talk to clients about a lot is you usually have 3 roles in your business or 3 roles in your life rather in a family business. What's the personal role? Mother, father, brother, sister, son, daughter, nephew, niece, etc. What's your role in the business? Are you the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, the janitor, the front, the front counter person, or what is your role in the business? And then, what is your role in potential ownership? Are you an owner or are you not an owner? And when you're an owner and you have a role and you also are in the family, conversations usually go better when you say, "Well, are you talking to me as though you're the CEO of the firm or my dad or where are we going right now?" And I think that was a lot of the friction is you just don't really communicate about these things correctly. It's always heat of the moment or there's some old shit that gets brought up, whether it's old shit that I bring up or old shit that he brings up. But after that first year of him not talking to me, the next 9 years we had the best relationship. I don't even think it was, yeah, it was about 9 years. The next 9 years we had the best relationship we ever had. And when he started to see how successful I was becoming, he'd come to my house and he was like, "Oh, did you just buy that?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "The Raptor." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Wow." And I go, "What's the matter? What? Spit it out." And he goes, "I'm just jealous. It looks really nice." I'm like, "You can afford one. Go buy one." He goes, "Ah, yeah, we'll never go buy one of those." He goes, "So you have the BMW and the Raptor?" And I'm like, "Do you want the truck, Dad?" I threw him the keys. I go, "Take the truck." He goes, "I can't take this truck." I said, "Yeah, you can take the truck. Take the truck. You want the truck? Take the truck." But my mindset as I started to grow this thing, um, a lot of times I was defaulting back to what I knew. And what I knew was dad's way of thinking mixed with like what I learned along the way. But the theory of abundance was never really part of the conversation or part of my life. And when I started
When you're talking abundance, you're talking to the family space of abundance and to set up forward, or how you're thinking that?
to everything financial, abundance, and what you want out of life, everything that we had was within limitations. We were always in the scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And that changed for me, later on as I opened up my own firm. I think that was probably a lot of the I would say the positive momentum that I got in with the results of how successful the firm was becoming. But then my dad became terminal and he had cancer and it went from, "Hey, can you help me out? I see how successful you are," to "Holy shit, we really got to get this house in order." And the funny thing about being in this industry is you'll have guys that'll tout all day long estate planning and, how do you do tax planning? And I was saying the same thing. And all of a sudden I got thrown into the deep end. Fuck it, it wasn't even the deep end, dude. I got thrown 4 miles offshore in choppy oceans with a hurricane down the bow of the ship. And it was a lot. It was a lot of really getting in, and, I had to buy my mom out. I started my own family office. We had a manufacturing company. I had to take that over, and when my dad was sick, he said, when I said, "Listen, there's no other choice for me to take over," because he was like, "I don't know what we're gonna do." And I said, I'm just going to have to take over. So what about your own business? I said, I have a team in place. We're good. The only way that this is going to work, though, is if we do it my way. And you got to commit that anything that comes across your, across your desk, so to speak, if somebody makes a phone call, I need you to say, Bobby's in charge. And he says, okay, I'll do that. And from there, I took a lot of the systems that I put in my own business. And then, it was just gravy from there. I mean, it took 2 years, but it was a lot. And then we lost dad. So that wasn't, that made it hard. But, yeah, it's been quite a hell of a 26 years since we last 24 years since we last saw each other.
It's crazy because your dad, he's a great guy, right? And what you learn is that it's like, even with the friction, even with those parts, right? Just the lessons that we learn, so I have my Italian American dad too, right? But it's just that grind and figure it out mode it's hard for people coming into business to ever just understand that, right? Because it's usually that they either can't put in the work when the time is needed to put in the work, or they constantly falter when it's time to actually step up and make something happen, right? And to this point, to get thrown into that, right? Here's the thing. Okay, I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to go, we'll sell it off in pieces. We'll try to get whatever we can, right? Or, you know what, this has been dad's thing, right? I know that I can come in here and add value, so I'm just going to figure it out, right? And so, I commend you. I mean, that's usually what happens, is that it's one or two ways, right? The son says, you know what, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. It's too much. I got all these other things going on. Or, you know what, like, we're going to make this work. And then we just do. Right. And when you put that on, it's powerful, because it's the lessons that we've taken away that sometimes, it's like that full circle. It's like, there's that thing of like, when you get to a certain age as your kids, like, you're like, you want nothing to do with your dad, or you want nothing to hear from them. You want none of their advice. And then years go by, and then you start understanding like what they were trying to do. They're just trying to take care of us. And the next step is like, well, some of that stuff they were saying wasn't so crazy. Let me see how it is. And it makes complete sense, because here I am, at their age, thinking back. Right. And I think of myself, even when we went to college, right? My dad, like in his 40s, I'm like, running his whole business and like give me feedback. I'm trying to resist his feedback, but he's his own part. He's my age at this time, trying to give me feedback. It's like the same thing I'm doing to my kids. And it's like, okay, I have to take a deep breath. And especially when I'm speaking to my kids, and like not get frustrated, not get turned around, because ideally they're trying to figure out the world at the same time, of listen to me and take in what I'm trying to bestow on them, not to the point that I'm trying to make them do it, but the same part is, I hope it can at least give them the better understanding of how to make better decisions when they throughout, but even when they get to my age.
Well, perspective is a funny thing, right? Because every year I think about my dad a little bit differently, and my perspective changes a little bit more. You should be getting wiser with your years. I mean, that's just experiences should be accumulating and building on top of one another. And one of the things that, I look at my kids now, and I have a freshman in high school, I have an eighth grader, I have a third grader, and so many people try to get into their kids' lives and micromanage them. And I'm constantly, between my wife and I, it's like, hey, it's great that we experience this. It's great that we have our 2 cents of experience that we can throw their way, but at the end of the day, they've gotta learn it themselves. They've gotta figure it out themselves, because just what you said, life's about figuring shit out. You're not gonna have all the answers. And if you look at, one of the things that we talk about a lot is the next 5 years. And by 2030, every baby boomer is gonna be 65. AI is supposed to, reach singularity, and you're gonna have this transfer of wealth, which will probably peak out in about 14 years. Most people are gonna come into the situation that you brought up, where it's like, we're gonna have to sell this. Should we parcel it off? Should we sell it at one lump sum? How do we do it? Who do we sell it to? You know what? Let's just get rid of it. We don't want it anymore. There's gonna be a huge amount of opportunity, and for the people who can just figure it out, and they're filling up their coffers and they're gearing up and getting ready for it, I mean, sky's the limit.
We look at it because lots of times we see this in real estate, is that, the families own this for generations, right? Own this building since it was built, right? And then all of a sudden pass away, whether it's unexpectedly or not, right? And the kids take it over, and all of a sudden they're like, we don't know what to do with this thing. We're just going to sell it. So, we're now 50s, in our 50s or 60s, we're out of state, right? We don't want to operate this thing, so we'll sell it. And, we come in as a great opportunity for that, because we're in a position to know how to not only just buy it and not put the further stress on them, but then optimize the business, right? And so when you think about that going forward, right, there are going to be plenty of opportunities like that. There's going to be plenty of ways that you can go out there. But in this part, if you are one who are part of the family, if you can think through and just make rational decisions, you're going to be in a really great space to be able to go and really transform the business. I think most of the time, a lot of these businesses are missing a lot of things that can be updated pretty easily, right? It can be anything from just a marketing standpoint, right? Just create a social presence, right? To customer service standpoint, right? There's a lot of these little things that we can implement that doesn't have to completely transform the business, but will completely radicalize how you look at the business overall and just the revenues that you'll be able to create, and just even just to control its expenses from the bottom line up.
I just sat with a client, and we have the opportunity, or I said we, because everything was, I treat my clients like it's my money too. So we, really him, has an opportunity to sell his business, but there's another business that he wants to acquire. The other business that he wants to acquire is from an 84-year-old guy who doesn't really want to leave. He doesn't really have anything beyond if he's no longer, gets abducted by aliens and taken to another universe. He's got the opportunity to deploy money at a very low purchase price for a very high reward. These are the types of things that we're already starting to vet out with clients and for ourselves, because there are people out there that are going, I don't know what to do with this. And either they're aging out and they're like, my kids don't want anything to do with it, and the hell I'm going to leave it to them to have to deal with. I'm going to clean up my own mess. Or I want to make sure it goes to somebody who's going to do something with it and is going to continue the passion that I'm leaving behind. Just probably same that you see in real estate. It's time to get rid of it. When you have a game plan to kind of take advantage of that, and you don't want to take advantage of people, but you want to take advantage of being able to do that and put yourself in a position to do that. The next 5 years is going to be awesome.
And the taking advantage of part is that it becomes a win-win, right? Because you're taking off something that's perceived as a problem and making it an easy transaction for them. And then going in there for yourself, not giving away the farm to buy it, but in that part, getting it at you'll say, opportunistic price because of just the value add component that needs to happen, right? And so you look about some of these businesses, we see it, many times, in service space, in the real estate space, is that they're not hard fixes, right? But when you're so inside of it, right, it's hard to see it, right? And my friend always says, it's hard to see the label when you're stuck inside the jar,
Yeah.
right? And many times we're in these businesses that we're so close to that you just can't see the obvious stuff, right? Until someone points it out. But even that part, it's like, you ever said something to someone 100 times and then someone else says the same thing to them, and at that point they hear it from that person and then it makes complete sense. Like, that's how it is in these businesses.
You're married. I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, all day long, right? All day long. It's like you hear it and you're just like, wait. And then all of a sudden someone else says, you're like, that can make complete sense. I get it now. And it makes all the difference, right? But it's hard to do that. And it's hard to hear it, because most of the time when we're so into it, it's like we have our ears covered, right? Because we're just here, just hyper focused on whatever's just in front of us in the day, right? And we're not thinking forward, right? You talk about, family office, estate planning. It's like, it's hard to think that far out until you force yourself to think that far out, because you're so worried about what's happening right now, because you act like right now, if you don't stay with it, or you just take your finger off it for any moment, right? Like, you just feel like it's all going to collapse. But it's not true. Like, that's the moment where, like, you look at Elon Musk right now, like, just things he's done in Twitter to government. He's like, let's just get rid of 80% of people. We'll figure out who we need, right? Like, logically, we're doing about 80% of things in our business right now that you could probably wipe out and it won't have a major effect. And if we put all of our emphasis into the major drivers for the business, what's actually going to happen with the business? Well, it's going to take off. It's going to start producing what we always hoped with when we started it.
Right. And to your point, it's a win-win, right? Because if you're picking that up after the owner is no longer with us, what kind of answers are you going to get for some of the questions that you might have that only that person could really answer? And what kind of value are you leaving to their heirs? He's leaving a lesser value, or she's leaving a lesser value. So it's, maximizing your value while also keeping the continuity and being able to answer some questions. I mean, it's a huge pain point right now.
It was hard too, because like I had the same dad. He was always working, right? And so you'd look at that part, and that was a big change too, because I just was ingrained on just doing that same thing, right? But you talked about going back and looking at family first, and that that was a big change for us, was that when we started really making a change, we say, okay, let's look at this backwards, right? Look at this the opposite way. Let's put the family, like I'm going to control my time with family, and then the rest of it becomes work, right? And what happened is that you stop wasting time with work. You get in there and you actually make sure that you're focused on what needs to be done, so you can get back to the things you're supposed to be doing, which is the whole reason you're doing this, is the family.
I'm going to say two things here. One is that really didn't hit home until I lost my dad 3 years ago. When I lost him, that was a game changer for me. But you're right. When you give yourself a fixed period of time, right? You have your jar of life, and we've all seen the golf balls go first, and then the gravel, and then the sand, and then the water, the golf balls being those big things. And if you're whatever you value, right? Whatever you is your life driver. If you're not putting those things first, you're never going to have time for them. And my dad just never put that first. For him, it was first was the business, first was the money, the income. And, we could say that can stem back to, 10 or 15 different things that happened in his childhood, to his parents, the way he treated money. But I think that the main thing that I wanted to do was not repeat the sins of the past. It takes work, man. It's not easy. You revert back so easily. You have to stay the path.
It's hard to break the mold, but if you look back, like you give credence, like if I look at my grandma's still alive. She's 94, right? She's through the Great Depression. Like that's how she's raised, right? So to ever think that my grandma's gonna be a risk taker at that point, because just, she's sleeping on like a dirt floor, like, come on, right? But at a certain point, you're like, you need to do this because of this. But then you think back about being rational about what she went to, and then what that passed to my parents, and then my parents passed to me, right? Now I start to get it. But it's hard to see that, a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, and look back at that. But when I look at it today, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get it. I get what they went through. My dad was in Vietnam, like all these things that you carry through. And I look at it today, I'm like, yeah, I get it. And it doesn't have to be my path though, but it's better for me to understand their path, right? It's better for me to say, okay, now I get why they were saying things in many ways. And what's hard is that, sometimes we get advice from people that's close with us, and it's like you want to be like, why would you give me that advice? And it's not like they're trying to give us bad advice. They're trying to give us advice for them because they love us or they care for us, right? Or things in between that, like they're trying to say in the moment because of what they hope will help us, even if it's to us not beneficial. It's not that they're bringing it to us in a poor way or a bad
It's
way,
relevant to them.
correct, relevant to them. It's them they think is going to pass along with us. But when you look at their perspective, right, it gives us the open-eyed approach to see it and say, okay, now I understand why it's coming that way. Now you have to take it, but you can understand it's not coming out of malice or misintent, or it's not coming in a way that it's coming to hurt us. It's coming to help us in their own perspective, even if it's not a straight line trajectory of why it's helping us.
There's a lot of interesting studies that have been done on, especially since this is the first time in history 5 generations have worked side by side. And when you look at kind of where we are in that gritty, that gritty, what's the latchkey? We were always like the latchkey kids, the latchkey generation. The studies go back to just say, what are the things in kids' early years for each generation that really impacted them? And it's interesting because even like you looking backward, right? Grandma, dad, looking at where we are, for us, it was the Challenger. And, one of the things that they bring up is you're sitting in a school, and a big rolling cart with a huge box TV comes rolling in. And we're all excited to see, first time in history, a woman's going up to space. She's a teacher. This is going to be great. All of a sudden, the rocket goes up and boom, it blows up. And what happens afterward? They turn it off. They pull out the plug.
Rolling back out.
They
Yeah.
roll it back out, and we go back on to class. There was no trauma therapy. There was no, how are you feeling? How does this make you feel? It was kind of like, just go back to the grind. If you look at the next generations, though, because I think we've heard a lot about the lazy millennials, and then we've got the Gen Z, and then we've got the alphas and the betas, or whatever the lineage is, that down to our kids. As we look forward, it's going to be really important for us, being still the smallest generation, Gen Xers, how we communicate with the future leaders to make sure that they're listening and hearing, and we're speaking and listening in ways that we communicate together. because that's going to be huge.
It's funny, and I remember exactly where I was in school at that time, right? And so you think about that, like, and it's been, there's lots of things I can forget, but like that moment, I'm like, yeah, I was sitting there, same thing happened, right? And all of a sudden, they were like, okay, and then I think it was on lunch break, right? And then the kids were coming back, that went home for lunch, and we're going back, and it was like it was just surreal, right? And you're right, is that going forward, like I think of my kids today, like you have everything's digital, right? So you like we're going somewhere, and you put in MapQuest, Google Maps, and it's just taking you where you're going, right? My kids want me to put in the direction of the map if we're literally going on one road straight. I'm like, guys, like like we used to have these things called maps. When you would cross the line, you would go across the state, you would have to go into the gas station and try and find another map that would have the connector, and you keep going, right? But it made us continually have to just like think through things, right? You think of anything, and like today it's so easy and good, right? It can transform society. There's lots of things we can do that can help us level up, from education, healthcare, all kinds of things. Fantastic, right? But you have to, not for the sake of hard just to be hard, but there's that certain thing that you have to create an implied or imposed struggle in your kid's life, because it can be so easy, right? Like, and
How do
everything
you
can just be
do
like a touch
that?
of the park.
I think
You know,
that's the magic in the bottle, right? Because
yeah.
how do you really do that? I'm sure you're doing very well for yourself, right?
You know, you're right, because it's there's that certain line, right? Because like I'll give you a couple of these little things, right? It would be when things come up, right? And it could be like anything. Like I have 6, 8, and 10-year olds, so like some are still in the part, but like it could be anything from like tying their shoe. Like I'm constantly tying their shoe in the part to like just figure it out. Just go sit there until you figure it out and just get it done, even if it's not perfect, right? Or like opening a ketchup packet, like these little things that you just think are like these easy passovers, and they're not perfect, right? Because you don't want your kids to be like, hey, walk home. Like that's not the whole point today, where I'm like, go walk home. Like we're down the highway, just go walk home and figure it out like we used to do, right? Like that's not what I want to do and put the risk out there. But I need to create these things where it's not constantly, every time something comes up that's just a little bit difficult, right? Just like a little bit, that I go, hey, dad, can you just get this for me? And I could easily say yes, right? Or because it's easier for me to just do it, right? And be done with it in 2 seconds than to say, no, you got to figure it out. And you're like, I can't do it, right? And then you're like, yeah, I know, but go try it. Just figure it out, right? It's like that same, it's like the same thing with like going to like tablets or like anything else, like the easy thing, right? Kids are born and at 2 months old, they're sitting in front of a tablet. You're like, okay, parents, like, let's figure this out, to the point of being like, okay, well, I'm bored. Good. Be bored. Like go figure something out. And what happens? Next thing you know, they're like outside doing something, and they're making the world out of nothing, right? Where in part they're just, before they could have just had a tablet, because it was easier for me just to give them that, we'll say, give them that short-term fix that doesn't really create value, but just passes them to the point where I can get back to what I'm doing,
So
right?
I'll
And
tell you, you know what? And then we'll bring up like, the events that have happened in kids' childhoods that help to carve who they are or how they view life. That was the one blessing that I would say comes out of COVID. My kids, we spent such really good quality time together, and some of those things happened just because of the circumstance that we were in. And, they were able to, they weren't so over demanded by everything else that was going on, because very low interaction. We had to kind of figure it out. You don't want to make them just walk home, but there definitely is some tests that you can bring them through. I find games too. If I try to make my kids play games with me, that's a fun way too.
there's things you can do, but where it's just so quick now. You think of like information creator, like it's just so easy to give them the thing that would just placate them for the moment, right? But at a certain point, like they're gonna get in reality, right? Get out into life and be like, shoot, like I'm now not at the house, like anything. Like how do I do laundry, or just these things that you would have to figure out in college that are just going to be so easy that everything's going to be a struggle. You're going to get out into the world, like, and everything's going to seem hard because as you go through business, like, right, harder things get easier over time, right? The things that like the first time you do it, it's impossible. The next time you do it, it's semi impossible. The next time you do it, okay, it's kind of still impossible, but I know I have some confidence I can get it done. The next time you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't that bad. The next time you go through it, okay, that's pretty easy. The next time it's no big deal, right? And you look back at it, 5 years ago, and you're like, I don't remember what was hard about it, right? But like usually those, because you do harder and harder things that become easier and easier and easier. You can think of it everything from mentally, physically, emotionally, right? That you go through it. But if we have no resistance as we go through and grow up, right? Well, then everything just gets harder and harder because every single time it's frantic, it's going to break me, it's going to end the world, right? And there's no perfect for it, but and it's not something of a there's no perfect recipe, right? I don't have the magic wand to say what's hard or hard enough. And like you just like myself, we don't want our kids' life to be just horrible and hard. Is that we're creating some kind of resistance in there that can make them more tolerant when they face challenges that are coming, whether they like it or not.
Well, you said something funny before, right? You said 80% of the things you can wipe away and you'll still make it happen. Right? It was off the cuffs of Elon Musk and Doge. That's something that we've learned, right? Because what's the worst that happens? We go through these adversities and it's like, we fuck up, we figure something else. We may have intended to have one outcome and we learned that through messing up, we had a completely different outcome that actually was more beneficial. So we've learned that this experimentation, like we're not gonna die. We're not gonna get so well, we're not in the business of killing ourselves or giving ourselves some rare disease or being in a situation where we're risking our lives. We're in situations where it's like, you know what? We might lose some money, we might lose some time, might lose some pride and some ego, but we're going to get back up. We're going to learn something from it. We're going to pivot where we need to. That's, I think, the mindset that these kids lose because there's a lot of things that are just handed to them and back to figure it out, right?
That's a really good message just for people that want to do anything outside the normal what they've done, right? Is that you like you've been working a job for 20 years, like you left college and like say someone like stay just in the same course after college and they're just sick of it today, right? And they want to go start a business, do something different, right? But you're so scared of that first step because you think like if you do anything different than what you are doing, the world's going to collapse. But when you go figure it out, like you take a step and you're like, okay, you know what? That wasn't that bad. Or it was awful. It was like, okay, well, let's not do that again. Try another step, right? And when you think about it, you're like, but it's never that bad, right? Like I think about it, like in terms of what you spoke about here is that I call it like 5-second or 5-year problems, right? Like or things that really need it. Like you and your dad, your family business, your dad, getting sick and passing away. That's something that you're gonna remember in 5 years. You need to put all your energy in like you did, right? But then there's 5-second things that happen in a day that we treat them the same. It's like we treat the 5-second problems like the 5-year problems, but they're not. Like the 5-second problem is just something that, part of your day, right? Something came up, okay, just deal with it, and like you're never gonna remember it, right? And so if we could stop treating everything on like RPM 8,000, right, and put everything into perspective of being like, okay, you know what? That's an important decision. I need to put all my energy into it compared to these things that are just happening throughout the day that ruin you and put all the stress on you, but they're really not big deals.
It's the devil versus the one you don't. And I think that's why people kind of sit and they stew in whatever it is that they're sitting in, right? Whether it's I'm not happy at my job. You know how many people I know who are like aspiring entrepreneurs? I wanna open up my own business. I'm gonna start a side gig. And they run the side gig, and the side gig is always a side gig. It's never gonna be their real gig because they're not cutting the cord, feeling the pain that there is no plan B, and putting their all into that endeavor. They've got that fallback, and whenever you have that fallback, or whenever you have that mentality of like, "If I change, it's gonna be so hard." You're fucking miserable now. What's gonna get worse? Are you gonna get more miserable? There's an opportunity to be happy. What is the worst case scenario? And some people, they just like the status quo. They like where they are, even though they hate it.
Survive or die mentality, right? It's like going back to the caveman years where like you're either going to get food or get eaten by a saber-tooth tiger. Like we still have that. Like that's all we think about is like the worst case happening, right? And so if you go out there and like they step outside what they're doing, right, that's what's going to happen. You might get eaten by a saber-tooth tiger, but they don't put it in effect. Like maybe they would just have a happy life and everything would be great. But that's so hard to think about that side of it because they've never had that feeling in there. They've only seen like what potentially happened, right, and all the feedback they get. So it's hard to go and change that narrative because that 1% you can't give credence to that 1% of good, right? You can only give credence to that 1% of bad. But I ultimately, right, like if the bad could happen, the good could happen, right? So okay, let's look at it. Like what could you do? Well, I go try it, and okay, that was horrible. Okay, well, I go back to the job I've been doing that makes me a little less happier than I want to be, but happier than I just did of trying that thing out. Okay, good, I can do that, right?
And it doesn't have to be this like 180-degree life shift. It could be small incremental. It doesn't have to be so dramatic. But people look at it as like any change is dramatic. Any change is something that's gonna shatter, their foundation, and that becomes scary for them.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, Bobby, man, it's always good. I can't believe it was so long before we connected again, man. And this was good and fun to do. So for everyone listening that wants to come find you here, I have a couple things, so give me the website, Instagram, where you want people to find them, podcast name again.
You know what? BobbyMascia.com. You can find me on grwealthplan.com. You can come check us out at Business Unchained. We're on all and you're next on the docket. And I'm gonna bring you through the grill session. Instagram. I mean, I'm all over the place. You just take throw one of the links in there, and whether or not it's something you're interested in learning more about how we look at business, or you're looking at more of what do I do for my business and wealth accumulation and making sure that I'm protected, or succession planning, or selling my business, or what the hell do I do? We could have that conversation. No strings attached.
Well, Bobby, thank you so much for joining us on the Live 100 podcast. That's what we have today. Let's do this.
All right, brother. Appreciate you.